The last part of this topic of this long lecture about Virgin Mary deals with some common iconographic images, positions, and themes, Marian themes that eventually became very popular in the later age, later Paleo-Christian age, and also in the medieval period. And as we said in the previous clip, we will also notice many similarities with these images and other forms of art coming from the Renaissance and the early modern period. When I say similarities, the position of Mary and the way she's holding Jesus, and kind of also the whole composition of ideas. Now, in later ages, therefore after the Paleo-Christian period, after the 5th and 6th century, especially in painted iconography, but not from a funerary context, Mary started to be represented in different scenes, but always in some way related to Christ. A clue pointing to the possible shift of focus from Christ to Mary could be found in the names that were given to these images, which are always in the feminine. Okay, so now we shall be presenting some very popular scenes of Mary, obviously popular in the early Middle Ages or in the late ancient Christian era, and the titles are all feminine. Therefore, they are related to Mary and not to Christ. But as you will see, Christ is mostly present as well. Okay, so in some way, we can say that there is a renewed interest in Mary, we can say, or a revived interest in Mary, but Christ is always still present. But still, let's say the attention is a bit more Mariological than Christological. Among the most popular in the ancient late Christian age and in the early medieval age, we find these following themes. First of all, we have the galactotrophusa. Now, galak in Greek means milk. Okay, therefore the galactotrophusa, obviously, I mean, probably you can come to the conclusion by yourselves, it's related to breastfeeding. Mary, who is giving her milk to Christ. The earliest examples of this icon are found in Egypt, and therefore the inspiration is most probably the images of Isis breastfeeding Osiris. Okay, so the earliest image we find of Mary breastfeeding Christ comes from Egypt, and most probably the inspiration must have been Egyptian mythology. Okay, we have these very ancient myths coming from Egypt of the goddess Isis breastfeeding her divine son, and it was kind of transposed to Mary. Now, when I say the oldest image, I am referring to an image kind of that can be transported. I'm not referring to the oldest image per se, because the oldest image, as we have seen, was found in Rome in the catacomb of Priscilla. So a very good example of this galactotrophusa is found in the Coptic Museum of Cairo, which was originally, this image was originally found in the monastery of St. Jeremiah in Saqqara, and it is dated to the 6th century. Therefore, if you remember, in the 3rd century, we have the first image found in the catacomb of Priscilla of Mary holding Jesus to her breast, probably breastfeeding, but we cannot say for sure because the image is highly damaged, we can say. And then the oldest image we know of is this one here. And as you can see, it's very clear that here Mary is breastfeeding child, breastfeeding her child. The part which is lost, unfortunately, between Mary's face and Jesus' face is actually showing her breast, which is being given to Jesus in order to suckle. In Rome, the earliest Marian image, which is found, as we said, in the catacomb of Priscilla, is most probably also a galactotrophusa. But as we said, it is difficult to say because the image is quite faded. Now, after this, the first Madonna with this imagery comes from the 12th century in Rome, obviously, comes from the 12th century mosaic, which is found in the facade of Santa Maria in Trastevere. Santa Maria in Trastevere is most probably the most ancient church dedicated to Mary in Rome, but it was originally an unofficial church, because the first official church dedicated to Mary is Santa Maria Maggiore. But Santa Maria in Trastevere is most probably the first, let's say, Marian shrine in Rome, but it was kind of more popular rather than official. And this beautiful mosaic that you are seeing now is found in the facade, in the lower tier, in the higher tier of the facade. And as you can see, it is very clearly showing Mary breastfeeding Jesus. So after the image found in Priscilla of Mary with Christ close to her breast, this is the first one that we have almost 1,000 years later. Another most popular image of Mary is the so-called Kyriotissa. Now, Kyriotissa comes from the word kurios, which means Lord. So here Mary is kind of the lady, okay, the lady who is enthroned. Now, this was already present in some way in the Epiphany scenes, where Mary is always represented seated on a throne, while she herself is acting as a throne for Christ. Okay, as you remember, the scenes that we have seen in sarcophagi, but also in frescoes, Mary is always seated in the Epiphany scene. There is no scene where Mary is standing or anything. She is seated on a throne with Christ seated on her. From the late 6th century in Rome, we have images of the mother enthroned, holding her son, and also facing the public, sometimes with saints and angels on both sides. Now, coming from the same era, therefore from the 6th century, there is a magnificent fresco found in the catacomb of Comodilla, and one which is found also in the monastery of St. Catherine in Sinai. Okay, so the first image, the one where Mary seems to be dressed in purple, that comes from Egypt, from the monastery of St. Catherine on Mount Sinai, also dated to the 6th century. While the one on the right, where Mary is dressed in brown, it is found in Rome in the catacomb of Comodilla, as we are saying. And as you can see, two contemporary images, one from the East and one from the West, but which are technically the same. I mean, even the position of the hands of Mary. One is on Christ's shoulder, the other one is underneath his back, basically. And even the way Mary is enrobed, okay, the robes that are going around her figure. I mean, it's practically the same image. So we can see that these ideas were present in Christianity all over the empire. Now, there is also a variant of this, a variant wherein Mary is found in the same posture, therefore seated, facing the public, and with Christ seated on her, but this time Mary has an imperial crown on her head, okay? And this version is called the Basilissa. Basilissa, which comes from Basileus, which means king. Therefore, this is the lady, while the Basilissa is the queen or the empress. And as you can see here, we have a particular image of this iconography. This is, in fact, the earliest known icon of this version of the Basilissa. And it is a wooden icon painted directly on wood, and it is also found in Santa Maria in Trastevere. So this goes also to prove the ancient roots of this church. As you can see, Mary is seated on a throne with Christ on her. This time, she has an imperial crown on her head, and with her hands, she seems to be either waving or blessing, or else holding something which unfortunately is lost due to the damage in the icon. And next to her, there are those two angels, the angels which kind of represent her court. Okay, Mary, who is the queen, and who has kind of her servant serving her due to her authority because of her son. Another very popular image is the so-called Hagiosoritissa, okay, which is the interceding Madonna, Our Lady who is interceding for others. Now, these are the first known icons showing Mary without Christ. Okay, so these are the very first images of Mary on her own. The first known of these was the icon, which was probably destroyed in 1453 during the sack of Constantinople, which was found in the Basilica of Hagia Soros, where the relic of Mary's dress was stored. There is this interesting story, obviously apocryphal, of the dress of Mary, which was transported, which was stolen literally from Jerusalem and taken to Constantinople, and a basilica was built in honor of this very important relic. Now, in Rome, there is a copy of it, which is this picture here. And this comes from the 7th or the 8th century. According to popular tradition, I mean, a certain branch of popular tradition, this is the actual old icon. I mean, some people say that it was transported to Rome from Constantinople when the Muslims were kind of invading the area and they were basically conquering the whole East. So there is this version of the story that says that this icon was brought immediately to Rome, where it was stored for safekeeping. But I mean, it is more probable that this is a copy, an ancient copy, nonetheless, from the 7th or the 8th century, which was made by some traveler to Constantinople and who eventually donated it to a church in Rome. Now, in these images, Mary is facing the onlooker. As you can see, she is looking right outside of the picture. And she has a sad look. That is why she is called the interceding Madonna, because her sad look shows her concern for the person who is looking at her. And usually she has one hand raised in counsel and the other on her chest in prayer. Okay, there is another one which is found in Araceli, which is very popular. As you can see, the image is very similar. Okay, one hand is on her breast, the other is raised, as you can see, and Mary is facing the public, and she looks very sad. Okay, now these might be the origins of the Dolores Madonna that became very popular in the Middle Ages and onwards. Okay, the image of the Addolorata, or as we call her, Motis de Dolori, probably the origin was these images. Okay, Mary, who is looking sad, but in the case of the Dolores Madonna, she is no longer sad for the onlooker, but she is sad for what is happening to her son. Okay, so there is this transition also in importance. And as you can see in this very old Dolores Madonna that you have on the far right of the screen, Mary is not looking at the onlooker. She is looking somewhere else, probably to a crucifix that is right next to her. So you can see the difference. Okay, but probably the roots of the Addolorata comes directly from these previous images of the Hagiosoritissa. Now, another very popular, by far the most popular image of Mary is the Hodigitria. Now, Itria is Iter rather than Itria. Iter is a road, okay? And Hodos is also a road. So the Hodigitria is Mary who shows the way, Mary who indicates the way. Now, in these images, once again, Mary is carrying the infant Jesus, but this time she is pointing at him with one hand while glancing at the onlooker. Okay, so don't be scared at these images, but these are the most ancient that we possess. So as you can see, Mary is facing the onlooker, but with her hand, she is showing Jesus. Therefore, she is telling them, okay, look at him because he is the way. Follow him because he is the way. Therefore, Mary is showing the onlooker the way he or she has to follow in life, and obviously the way is Christ. Christ who himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, traditionally, the earliest known example was found in the Holy Land in the monastery known as the Hodegon. Now, the Hodegon is literally the monastery of the guides. Who were these guides? These guides was inhabited by monks whose mission was to help the blind. Okay, they were not tourist guides, but they guided the blind people, which was obviously their charism, their mission. And the first image of the Madonna showing the way was found, according to tradition, in this monastery. The one which is saying this scary-faced Madonna is found in Rome, and it is the earliest version of this icon of the Hodigitria that we find in Rome, and it is found in Santa Maria Nova, the Church of Santa Maria Nova, and it dates from the early 5th century. Okay, so as you can see, we are very, very, very early in time here. And there is also the so-called Santa Maria ad Martires, and this image is found in the Pantheon, which when it was still a pagan temple, it was the temple of all the gods. That is why it's called Pantheon, all the gods. When it was changed into a Christian church, it practically kept the same title, rather than all the gods, all the saints. Okay, Our Lady and all the saints. Okay, and the saints back then were technically the martyrs. That's why it is called Santa Maria ad Martires. And this dates from the 7th century. Okay. However, the best exemplar known, even though the hands of the Madonna are not exactly as we see them here, like showing Jesus, the most popular example is the icon of Saint Mary of Santa Maria Salus Populi Romani, but which you shall see a bit later on. Okay, we'll speak about that later. Now, the final important Marian theme from the early Middle Ages is Mary as the tender mother. Okay, remember, as you can see, in all the cases, Mary here is represented as a mother, even when Christ is not present. Okay, when we were discussing the Hagios Oritissa, Mary is presented as a mother of the onlooker. Now, the final, as we say, the final stage in the development of Marian iconography in this period is Mary as a tender mother, and she is called the Glycophilusa, or else the Eleusa. Okay, it practically means the same thing. And this image combines three of the above rows. It combines the Kyriotyrissa, because Mary in these images is enthroned. It includes in the theme the Hagios Oritissa, because Mary is kind of looking at the onlooker, and her interceding abilities are shown through the tenderness in the image, and also the Hodigitria, because in many cases she is also pointed to Christ. The most immediate predecessor of the Glycophilusa is the Hodigitria. Okay, so the main inspiration, we can say, is the Hodigitria, the one which we saw a bit earlier, because it is very easy to confuse the two images. If one sees a Glycophilusa, most probably, I mean, if he does not know this particular variant, he would probably think it is a Hodigitria. But there are some features which kind of show a little difference. The most salient feature is that while looking at the onlooker, Mary is also touching Jesus' cheek. So the cheeks of Mary and Jesus are literally touching each other, denoting the mother's tenderness. Now, one of the best examples, funnily enough, is found in Malta. Okay, it is Our Lady of Damascus. Okay, Our Lady of Damascus, which is found in Valletta, which has recently undergone some very good restoration. It was brought originally from the Knights. It was originally brought to Malta by the Knights from Rhodes in the year 1531. But according to tradition, it was produced in Damascus in the early 12th century. Okay, so here we have a very ancient image as well. And a very famous contemporary image is the Vladimir Madonna, which is found in Moscow, which is also dated to the 12th century. Now, these images that you are seeing here, the one on the left with the yellow background is the Vladimir Madonna found in Moscow, and the other one on the right is our very own Madonna of Damascus, or as it is known in Malta, in Damascena. As you can see in both cases, Mary is looking at the onlooker, but at the same time, she is kind of playing with Christ. Okay, her cheeks are touching his, like as if Jesus is kissing her, and also her hand is pointing to Jesus. So there is the Hodigitria theme included as well. Now, a very interesting feature which practically appears in most of the icons are these stars. Okay, and usually Mary has 3 stars on her: one on her left shoulder, one on her forehead, and another one on her right shoulder. But obviously, sometimes it is covered with the figure of Jesus. Now, what do those 3 stars represent? Those represent the 3 stages of virginity of Mary: a virgin before conception, a virgin during childbirth, and a virgin after childbirth. Okay, therefore the perpetual virginity of Mary. And these 3 images, these 3 stars, as we said, in Greek icons, they are practically always present. Okay, and that also, it's another way of proving the popular belief of the people in the perpetual virginity of the Mother of God. And finally, we can also say that sometimes the themes were mixed. Okay, obviously with the passing of time, artists become more adventurous, sometimes mixing one thing with the other and producing something beautiful nonetheless. One of the best examples of these mixed themes is the icon that I have already mentioned earlier, but without showing you the picture. It is the Salus Populi Romani icon, which is found in Rome. And it is this beautiful icon here. Now, this is just after the restorations that were carried out a couple of years ago. Before, it was much different. Now, this icon is very difficult to date, okay, because according to tradition, it was already present in the 5th century when the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore was built. But from the studies that were carried out, it seems that it was done sometime between the 8th and the 13th century. Okay, I mean, some features in the iconography point to an earlier period, while some other features and also the carbon dating of the wood, but which sometimes can be misleading, it is dated to the 13th century. So sometime between the 8th and the 13th century. Now, here we see a mixture of the Hodigitria and the Kyriotissa. Okay, Our Lady is seated, so she is enthroned, and she is holding Christ, but without touching his face. So it is not the other one. It is not a Glycophilusa. Okay, she is looking at the onlooker, but somehow she is not pointing at Christ because her hands are folded. Okay, so it is a mixed theme. We can say there is something from the Hodigitria, there is something from the Kyriotissa, but it is unclear where exactly this icon stands. Another case of mixed themes is an early 14th century icon of the so-called Eleemonitria, okay, Eleemonitria, which is found also in Valletta, in the Church of Our Lady of Damascus. Now, according to tradition, the knights brought with them a number of very important icons. Our Lady of Damascus and this one are two of them. There was another one, very old and very devout, which unfortunately was destroyed when the church was bombed during the Second World War. Now, the Eleemonitria brings together the Eleousa, which is the, as we said, the Glycophilusa is the same thing, and the Hagiosoritissa, and also the Hodigitria. In this case, what do we see? We see Mary facing the public with a sad look, therefore it is the Hagiosoritissa. It is also the Hodigitria because her hand here, or less what's left of it, is pointing to Jesus. And for some reason, it is also considered kind of a tender mother because of her sad imagery. So, as you can see, here we have the 3 stars, 1, 2, and the other one is hidden. And in this case, in the icon from Rome, rather than stars, we have crosses. There is a cross here, there is a faded cross here. I have no idea why they did not kind of retouch it to make it more visible. And presumably there is also another cross behind the figure of Christ. So as you can see, these themes related to the perpetual virginity of Mary were present even in the West, okay, even in these scenes, in these images, even though slightly different. Rather than putting stars, they preferred to put crosses. But in any case, they represent the same thing. So that brings to an end this rather long feature about the imagery of Mary. Obviously, there is much more to say, but these are the most important points related to ancient Christian art. Okay, and as you can see, we also kind of invaded a bit the medieval period. Most probably, we will be revisiting some of these images when you do the part on medieval Christian art. But technically, I have an idea of how Mary was represented and used also in art, okay? Because obviously each image is there for a reason, and Mary is more often than not represented as, first of all, the one who brings Christ to the world, but also, as we have seen in these icons especially, Mary is seen as the one who also intercedes for the common people in front of her son.